Tonight we're continuing on in the book of Ezra, building the temple. And it's all about adversity tonight, all about what's going to come at these Jews when they try to build the temple of Yahusha. Last chapter, we heard of nearby political factions who threatened the returning Jews in order to hinder the temple construction, so much that it delayed its start. Today in chapter 4, we get more specifics and even learn of opposition groups reporting these Jews to the Persian authorities as potential rebels and tax dodgers, with the hope of thwarting both the construction of the temple and the restoration of the all-important defensive walls of Jerusalem. But to what end? Why would these groups be opposed to these projects? Because different groups had different agendas. And so there was not just one single cause or reason for the adversity, but many reasons why the temple of Yahuah should be stopped at all costs. And remember, this temple is a shadow of us. Just like today, the battle is on for human hearts. Yeah? Satan does not want human temples being born anew. So let's get into Ezra chapter 4. Many adversaries, so it already calls them adversaries, not friends, not fellow Jews, many adversaries living in the area were against the people returning from exile, for they heard that they were building a temple for Yahuah, the Elohim of Israel. So they came to Zerubbabel and to the family leaders and said, remember Zerubbabel's the boss right now. We haven't heard about Ezra yet. Zerubbabel's in charge of rebuilding the temple. So these guys came to Zerubbabel and the family leaders and said, well, let us help you build the temple. Seems friendly, doesn't it? Let us help you build the temple. We're all the same here, and we seek your Elohim the same as you do. In fact, we've been offering sacrifices to him ever since King Esarhaddon of Assyria brought us here. So they look friendly, don't they? Why can't we all just get along, be together? That's what they're all saying in the world today. Why can't we all just get along? We're all the same, really. We all worship the same God. Really, it's all the same, isn't it? Check out what this guy says. Zerubbabel, Jeshua, that was his offsider. Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the other family leaders of Israel answered, no, we don't have anything in common. So you people can't help us build a house for Yahuah. Only we alone are permitted to build this set-apart temple, for Yahuah is the living Elohim of Israel. This is what King Cyrus of Persia commanded us to do. Zerubbabel pulls no punches, cutting them off, insulting them in this honor-based culture, and offering no hope for future collaboration. Why? Can you turn the aircon hotter, please? Hotter. So Zerubbabel pulls no punches, cutting them off, insulting them in this honor-based culture, and offers no hope for future collaboration. Why was he so, when everybody else might have been like, well, why not? Why not? Why is he so? No, you can't help us. Because notice that these were not well-meaning and sincere people who wanted to be good neighbours, but rather the text calls them adversaries, enemies of the Jews, who sought to portray themselves as friends, who share a common cause, apparently. But they did it in order to cleverly grab hold of the building project, to turn it into something more in line with their agenda. So, this is what's happening to Zerubbabel while he's trying to build the temple. While we are commanded by Yahusha to love our enemies, light can never coexist with darkness, no matter what the good intent. Mixing behaviour Yahusha considers flat out wrong with his bride is not permitted, and we must address it when it arises. Understand that? People may come in among us that look like they're fellow believers. We'll help you do this thing. We'll help you praise, we'll help you build this. Yeah, no. Not if they're not gone through the process we've gone through. We must address all behaviour that's wrong. So these adversaries began to hinder and discourage Judah, trying to frighten them in order to stop the building of the temple. Frighten them. These enemies hired government officials to work against the people of Judah. The officials constantly did things to stop the Jews' plans to build the temple. This continued the whole time that Cyrus was the king, right until Darius became the king of Persia. These enemies even wrote letters to the king of Persia trying to stop the Jews. They wrote a letter the year that Xerxes became the king of Persia. Who were these adversaries now squatting in the promised land, claiming it as their own? Who were they? Remember that even when the Jews were permitted to go home to Israel, it was not to become their own sovereign nation. The kings of Babylon and Persia simply let them go home, merely to live and worship as they pleased, but still under the Persian rule, which would become the Greek rule, which would become the Roman rule. They never really ever got their land back. They never got their sovereignty back, not since Solomon lost it. So they were allowed to go back, as we're seeing, but the Persians were still in charge. So these enemies in Jerusalem were mostly foreigners, imported by the Assyrians to the area of Samaria and other parts of the former kingdom of Ephraim, Israel, the area of the 10 northern tribes. Recall that around 723 BC, the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom and deported and scattered the 10 Israelite tribes all over Asia. Once the land was emptied of Hebrews, they began immediately importing people from other conquered nations to replace them. This was standard operating procedure for the Assyrian government. The national kingdom was overrun, then the people were removed and scattered, and a different and foreign people were brought in to replace them. And this produced a completely ruptured social fabric that the Assyrians believed made rebellion all the more difficult. Makes sense? No doubt there were family remnants of some of the 10 tribes who had, for one reason or another, escaped the Assyrian deportation well over 2 centuries earlier, but by now they were well assimilated through intermarriage with other ethnic groups and through the typical pagan religions these foreigners had brought with them. So, while a distant memory of their Hebrew identity might have existed in some, as well as including Yahuah and whatever multiple deity pantheon they worshipped, they indeed would have nothing in common with a lot of these zealous and obedient Jewish exiles who felt unclean. Remember, they felt unclean. That's why the first thing they did was build the altar. They had nothing really in common with them. Even though they might have been technically Hebrews, they had nothing in common with them. Remember, Yahusha came for the sinners, prostitutes, tax collectors. And these guys who came back, majority of them from Babylon, felt unclean. They wanted to get right. They were desperate. And they desperately wanted to get right with their Creator again by restoring the temple services, getting clean again. That was the whole purpose. So, there's adversity arising. Later, when Artaxerxes became the new king of Persia, some of these men wrote another letter complaining about the Jews. The men who wrote the letter were Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabeel, and the other people in their group. The letter was written in Aramaic, that's just a Babylonian form of Hebrew, or wishy-washy type, and then it was translated. Then Rehum, the commanding officer, and Shimshai, the secretary, wrote a letter against the people of Jerusalem. They wrote the letter to Artaxerxes, the king. So this is like 3, possibly 4 kings after Cyrus, okay? So he didn't have the same passion as Cyrus had when he heard the voice to say, send them back. This is Artaxerxes here, Xerxes' son. So they complained to him. And this is what they wrote. From Rehum, who's writing this letter? The people that are complaining about the Jews building the temple, all right? They're living in the land. They don't want the temple built. They're going to write a letter to the king of Persia. And so they write, from Rehum, the commanding officer, and Shimshai, the secretary, and from the judges and important officials over the men from Tripolis, Persia, Erech, and Babylon, and from the Elamite from Susa, and from other people who the great and powerful 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 moved to the city of Samaria and other places in the country west of the Euphrates River. All those people. This is the copy of the letter sent to King Artaxerxes. From your servants living in the area west of the Euphrates River, King Artaxerxes, we wish to inform you that the Jews you sent from there are now in Jerusalem. They are trying to build that terrible city again. The people there have always rebelled against other kings. Now they have almost finished repairing the foundations and building the walls. Also, King Artaxerxes, you should know that if Jerusalem and its walls are built again, the people of Jerusalem will stop paying their taxes. They will stop sending money to honor you. They will also stop paying customs fees, and the king will lose all that money. So we have a responsibility to the king. We don't want to see this happen. So we are sending this letter to inform the king. King Artaxerxes, we suggest that you search the writings of the kings who ruled before you. You will see in the writings that Jerusalem always rebelled against other kings. It has caused much trouble for other kings and nations. Many rebellions have started in this city since ancient times. That is why Jerusalem was destroyed. He's got a point. King Artaxerxes, we wish to inform you that if this city and its walls are rebuilt, you will lose control of the area west of the Euphrates River. So, like any king, his response was pretty severe. Then King Artaxerxes sent this answer to Rehum, the commanding officer, Shimshai, the secretary, all the people living in Samaria, other places west of the Euphrates River. Greetings. The letter you sent us has been translated and read to me. I gave an order for the writings of the kings before me to be searched. Why? To find out if this temple being rebuilt was really commanded by Cyrus. I'm going to suss this all out and search the writings. The writings were read, and we found out that Jerusalem has a long history of rebellion against kings. Jerusalem has been a place where rebellion and revolt has happened often. Jerusalem has had powerful kings ruling over it and over the whole area west of the Euphrates River. Their kings received taxes, customs, fees, and tribute. So now, you must give an order for these men to stop work. That order must be given to keep Jerusalem from being built again, until I say so. Be careful not to overlook this matter. We should not let the building of Jerusalem continue. If that work continues, I will not get any more money from Jerusalem. So, a copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes sent was read to Rehum, Shimshai the secretary, and the people with them. So they went very quickly to the Jews in Jerusalem and forced them to stop building. So the work stopped on Yahuwah's temple in Jerusalem and did not continue until the second year that Darius was king of Persia. It stopped for a long time. There they are there. There's the different kings. Cyrus was all the way back here. And Darius and Xerxes, and now we're all the way over here. And we're about to see EZRA, I think next week, arrive on the scene. Because the building's just been left. They're too freaked out. And they've lied to this king and got him on side. And the king said, stop them. So they've stopped. The temple building project began with joy and high expectations. It was approached with reverence and enthusiasm to return to true, set-apart covenant relationship. But almost immediately, ring a bell, these Jews ran into strong adversity and opposition, which plays out for the rest of Ezra and into Nehemiah. The Samaritans, that's what most of the Jews lingering around the area were. A lot of them were Samaritans. The Samaritans constantly conspired with the Persian government to stop the building of the temple. After the temple construction was halted, it would not be until early in Darius' reign that the hopes and dreams of the Jewish exiles to construct the temple and get clean would begin anew. It can't be overlooked that not all the Jews who came back had spiritual matters in the forefront of their minds. Some, those called the heads of their fathers' clans, had an agenda of reclaiming their land holdings and possessions that they had left behind when they were forcefully exiled to Babylon, but were now being held by others, some foreigners, some Jews, some mixed ethnicities, who they saw as squatters. No doubt this group of Jews counted themselves as among the righteous and used a high-minded spiritual rationale for their return, even though it was only a thinly veiled cover for their primary intent, which was property recovery. So you've got your zealous, passionate leaders and a fair few Jews that wanted to get clean, and then you've got people that just wanted their land back, are into property recovery. And the Samaritans would have suspected that this was the real aim of all the returning Jews. So from the beginning, the Samaritans didn't accept that the building of Jerusalem was about spirituality, but instead it was about establishing Jewish political control and an occupation over the region. So they weren't thinking spiritually. They weren't thinking about their worship practices or sacrificing or getting clean. They just thought these guys want their land back and we're happy with it. But if you remember, the Romans thought the same thing about Yahusha's behaviour. The Romans thought the same thing about Yahusha's behaviour revolution also. And Yahusha told us that wolves will enter the flock with their own agendas to use and manipulate in order to feed their own power, position, and wealth. So, that's the end of the text. I want to look at this word adversity, because the temple's being built, this assembly, this fellowship is forming, and there has been and there will be adversity. There is plenty of pressure constantly, but people might decide to slink in among us. We'll help you rebuild. We worship the same, we're into you. They might even know the name. We're into Yahusha. Yeah, we've been immersed. But what have we got to look at? The behaviour. And inquire, have you been through this? Have you been through that? Have you gone through, give them a book. Have you been through this? Do you know this? Because what do we know? People want power, position and all that. And they may very well want to use us for it. So let's look at this word adversity. In the Hebrew, adversity means suffering, physically or mentally, grief, pain, a twist away from the light, as in nighttime, a limping or full halt. That's what happened to the temple building, wasn't it? It was limping and then it stopped because of the adversity. Tightness, trouble, a female rival, adversary, adversity, affliction, anguish, distress, tribulation, trouble, sorrow, bad or evil, whether natural or moral, adversity, affliction, bad, calamity, displeasure, distress, evil, grief, harm, heavy, hurtful, ill-favoured, mischievous, misery, naughty, noisome, not pleased, sadly, sore, sorrow, trouble, vex, wickedly, worst, wretchedness, wrong. These things might come among us. These things might already be among us. That's what demons want to actually bring out and use our bodies for. So, woe to us if we end up being the carrier of all these things in the fellowship, because that's what it is. It's an adversity. The work of Yahusha in all ages has known the pressure and persecutions of those who would seek to frustrate its advance. Remember, we're fighting, not fighting people. And what do demons want to do? Frustrate us all the time. Do stuff to us. They want to frustrate the advance of what's happening, Yahusha's doing. Risk and discomfort for Yahusha's bride is usual. Adversity is normal. And we should face that. It should be normal to us. Adversity should be normal if you're doing it right. What does the scripture say? 2 Timothy, Paul says, indeed, all who want to live a set-apart life in Messiah Yahusha will be persecuted. Will be, not might be, will be. While evil people and impostors will go from bad to worse, deceiving others and being deceived themselves. So he's letting us know what's going to happen, isn't he? John 15, if the world hates you, understand that it hated me first. If you belonged to the world would have loved its own. But because you do not belong to the world, on the contrary, I have picked you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Understand that? Hated him, they're going to hate us. The Jews of Zerubbabel's and then Ezra's, then Nehemiah's day, had to learn this same lesson before Yahuah allowed the temple to finally be built. But for a while, they seemed to take a path to try to find a political compromise in order to bring the desired result. Likewise with the shadow, Israel, so it is with the fulfillment, Yahusha's bridal fellowship today, us, where the eternal house is being built, the lively stones being shaped and chiseled and smoothed in order to present them fully formed and perfect at the coming of Yahusha Messiah. That's what all the judging and pressure and problems and Yahusha's dealing with us is for, to present us perfect. So we can be used in the most marvelous of marriage homes, the New Jerusalem. But these living temples and houses of Yahusha cannot mature without adversity to strengthen and train us. And one of our favourite scriptures, count it all joy, brothers and sisters, when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your belief works endurance. And let endurance have its perfect work. It's going to make us perfect, mature, so that you may be perfect, mature, and complete, lacking in nothing. That's what he's training us for, so that we will be lacking in nothing. We'll be blameless. And he does that by little thorns and prods and pokes and floggings and judging the fire. He does that to us so that we will become this. Scripture shows us that it's necessary for Yahusha's bride to become comfortable with being made uncomfortable for her spiritual maturity. I don't want to do that. That's outside of my comfort zone. Well, suck it up. If Yahusha's making us do it, putting it in front of us, got to do it. Get comfortable with being made uncomfortable. The Jews of Zerubbabel and Ezra's era no doubt happily journeyed back to Jerusalem, King Cyrus's decree in hand, believing that what lay ahead was smooth seas, clear skies, near universal acceptance of their divinely inspired mission to build their city and temple again, and that the only barriers to success would be the practical realities of time and funds to organise, plan, gather construction materials, and the inevitable delays caused by weather, errors, and schedules that were too aggressive. They seemed to have been surprised, very surprised, and became discouraged at the unexpected and violent opposition to their plans. Was Yahuah perhaps not in this after all? How could he follow through with his promise to first exile the Jews for their whoring, then keep them in exile for 70 years, and then after a proper period of discipline, send them home, only to find their hopes and dreams blocked at every turn? Does that sound like him? Because adversity brings endurance. Endurance brings maturity. If you stick around long enough, Even if things are so hard you can't take a step forward, just stand. Because endurance brings maturity. Maturity brings Yahusha. And Yahusha is what? Supernatural. It's all supernatural. So can you see what's happening in our fellowship right now? We need to get used to this because it's going to come and it's going to get worse as time goes on. Yeah? So that's the message tonight, guys. I want to press hard on the idea that these guys wanted to get clean. These guys wanted Yahusha in their lives. And the same is for us today. The altar is here tonight so that you can cry out to Yahusha and get free, for goodness sake. If you've got stuff in your craw, in your heart that you want to get free about, come down here. Anybody and everybody that's not clean should come and get clean, because otherwise you can't be part of this living organism that Yahusha's building among us. It's not going to work. So the altar is open, brothers and sisters, and I suggest you use it and get free so you can have peace and right relationship with Yahusha once more. Give it all to Yahusha. Upstanding. So we'll close the meeting. Your crown, through the portal on our heart, Yahusha, your crown with many crowns. About teaching us tonight. Thank you for being with us. We love you so much. Strengthen us all and let us take these words seriously. We've had many powerful words this week. You are testing us, you are judging us, you are cleansing us. And we pray, as prayed before, for all our families and friends. We protect them, guide them, draw them closer to you. And we pray that you use us in great and powerful ways. We just want to please you because we love you, Yahusha. So be it. Wonderful. Hallelujah. Next week's Pentecost, guys. Next week's meeting will be Pentecost meeting. So you'll have to work out what you want to do, what you want to eat, how you want to party on. There's 2 Sabbaths in a row. 2 Sabbaths in a row. So any groceries or what not you need, get them on Friday. Okay?
I didn't know what I was doing, what you were feeling, and when did we know? I recall a crowded, smoky room, and you and me had had enough of the fumes. Better with you, honey, for the things that we'll never regret. Better with you, honey, as we did the things we'll never forget. Better with you. Better with you. Better with you. Better with you. Always. It's so good to be together. It's so good to be together. It's so good to be together. You didn't show, so then my heart was aching. Where did you go? You seemed lost for sure. But I recall the bar you took me in, and there you were standing with your gin-soaked friend.